It was a special night for the Dallas Mavericks and the fans as Mark Aguirre's number 24 jersey goes up in the rafters. I'm going to talk all about that and his place in Mavs history on today's One More Thing of Locked On Mavs. All right, I'm back. Back from the AAC. Just had a special night in the American Airlines Center as the Mavericks had a fun game. Mavs, Hornets, Con Knipple versus Cooper Flagg. That was a lot of fun, but it was about Mark Aguirre for the most part. I get that we don't do a lot of history stuff on this podcast or Mavs history stuff, but I love some basketball history, and I love looking back at Mavs history. And if you're a newer Mavs fan, if you're a fan out there, like, man, I don't really like. I know Mark Aguirre was like a legend. I know his jersey went up in the rafters, but I don't know much about him. Why was this important? Then here is 15 minutes that I'm going to briefly explain a little bit or talk through some 1980s Mavericks, some Mark Aguirre, Rolando Blackman, Harper days, and because I think it was a really, really special night. I really enjoyed it. Just personally, professionally, I've got to be in the building for 3 of the 5 jerseys up in the rafters with Harper, Dirk, and now Aguirre, and Rolando Blackman and Brad Davis is a little before my time as far as their jerseys. But when you look back at the Mavericks, and the Mavericks through in history, right? Like I feel like you almost got to do like a before Dirk and after Dirk. Dirk is the Maverick, right? Like, I mean, he won the only title in 2011. So many of us Mavs fans have been huge fans of Dirk. But when we look at Mavs history, you kind of look at these different eras of this before Dirk, after Dirk. So if you look at that 1999, 2000, you get this kind of like start of the Dirk Cuban era. So then you have those, that goes for so long. And then you get, the 6.5 years of Luka. And then now we're in the Cooper era. So you kind of have the Dirk and the Luka and the Cooper. But if you go back to that point in the 99, 2000 year of the Cuban Dirk, the beginning of the Cuban Dirk era, then it's like, all right, what about the 20 years before that? Because the Mavericks start in 1980. So then you get these 20 years before Dirk and Cuban start together. And if we just work in reverse here and we go through the 90s and we go 10 years before Dirk and Cuban, that sucked. All right. I mean, we're talking, you have one playoff appearance for the Mavs in that 89-90 season, and then you get nothing. You get nothing for the decade. All right. No postseason experience. I mean, tough 10 years there for the Mavs. But then you go the 10 years before that, which is the first 10 years of the Mavericks existence in the NBA. And that's where you get some fun times. That's when you get some playoff basketball. That's when you get some matchups with the Lakers and Magic Johnson. And that's when you get the birth of the Mavs in that 1980 season. Norm Sanju was just celebrated the night before this Mark Aguirre jersey retirement. And if we start there, and let's start there just for a second. I know I might be boring some of you with some history stuff, but I want to get there to explain the importance of seeing what we just witnessed with Mark Aguirre and Mavs history. And if you're a true Mavs fan, then you want to know at least the brief history, or at least somewhat of the history of the Dallas Mavericks. So, you look at that first 1980 season, they draft Kiki Vandeweghe, and Kiki doesn't want to play for him. It's a mess. They win 15 games. Talking about a miserable season, but they win 15 games that first year. And then it's that next year, they get the number 1 pick in the draft. Sanju's the GM. You got Don Carter, the cowboy hat, which they had a cowboy hat setting in an empty chair tonight for Aguirre's jersey retirement, which it was a super classy move. And they draft a guy by the name of Mark Aguirre out of DePaul with the number 1 overall pick in the draft. And in the same, talk about a loaded draft. I mean, this is probably, if you want to talk about the Luka Brunson draft, but in the same draft, they take Aguirre 1, they take Rolando Blackman with another top 10 pick. And then in the second round, they get Jay Vincent. So they get 3 guys in there. But in particular, you look at Mark Aguirre, who goes 1 to Dallas. Number 2 is Isiah Thomas that goes to Detroit Pistons, which Isiah Thomas had a role in tonight's ceremony because Isiah Thomas, Aguirre grow up together, both from Chicago, and then they go to separate NBA cities. They end up reuniting later on in Aguirre's career, but they're like best friends. They've stayed, friends to this day. That's when we saw Isiah Thomas, giving a small speech tonight at the jersey retirement. So anyway, they get Rolando Blackman and Jay Vincent in the second round to kind of pair up with these guys. And then you get the 1980s of the Mavs. Like Mark Aguirre was the first, I think a lot of people have said star. Mark Aguirre is the first all-star in Dallas Mavericks history. He was the first guy to lead a Mavericks team to the NBA playoffs. There in the 1980s, you have Dick Motta as a head coach. I mentioned Jay Vincent. You have Brad Davis back then. They eventually get Derek Harper after that draft class. Sam Perkins, who was there tonight at the jersey retirement, which is awesome. James Donaldson there in the 80s, and they go to their first franchise. They go to the first playoff appearance in 1983-84. They beat the Sonics in the first round. They end up losing to the Lakers in the second round. But you also get Moody Madness in there, which so many of you guys have probably heard about Moody Madness. If you don't know much about it, there's different parts of it in books and stuff. I'm pretty sure Mavs.com did some type of flashback to Moody Madness at one point. So you can go and just watch, all the stuff with Moody Madness. It was a lot of fun. Basically, they couldn't play at Reunion Arena for this playoff game. And, there was a scheduling conflict, so they end up having to play a playoff game in Moody Coliseum at SMU. And but Mark Aguirre was one of the best scorers in the whole NBA. Averaged 29.5 points a game, second in the league. They had 5 straight playoff appearances in the 87-88 season. That's when they got to the Western Conference Finals and lost to the Lakers. I mean, talk about a fun playoff series or playoff run. That first series in that Western Conference Finals run, they go against a 25-year-old Hakeem Olajuwon. They beat him. They face Alex English in Denver in round 2, and then they match up in the Western Conference Finals with the Lakers and end up losing that season. But if you think about, even if you're a newer Mavs fan, and I would assume that we probably don't have a lot of listeners that were there in the 80s, but I do know we have some, because they've reached out to us and things. But imagine the playoff runs that we've had, that we've got to experience in Dallas, that we have guys like Jason Terry and Sean Marion and these guys throughout the 2000s, that these playoff performances have just meant so much, and they kind of create these playoff legends, right, of the role players. It's not just the Dirks of the world. So you take that and take how we value those playoff runs so much, and then go back to the 80s and they had 5 straight years in which they made the playoffs. They had multiple runs that went past the first round. You have a Western Conference Finals appearance against the Lakers. I hate the Lakers. And just this fun team, this high scoring Mark Aguirre guy is one of the best scorers in the entire league. He's your first all-star. He is, just honestly one of the best players in the NBA. And obviously you have Rolando Blackman, you have Derek Harper. These are the first Mavs. These are the guys that we got to see in the jersey retirement tonight, to see those guys all together, standing there together with Harper on one side, Ro Blackman on the other side, Mark Aguirre talking. And it's like you're looking at the first era of the Mavericks all together in one spot. Yeah, Jay Vincent was there, but it's like those are the 3 guys. And then after that season, that's where it kind of goes a little south. I want to talk about kind of where it went south with Aguirre and him leaving Dallas. And then I want to talk about Mark Aguirre, comparing him to Luka a little bit. Coming up right after this. This podcast is brought to you by our friends over at Game Time. During the basketball season, there's nothing like being in the building. The energy, the crowd. Honestly, tonight the crowd was amazing. The energy was amazing with Knipple going against Cooper Flagg. The first big run that gets everyone on their feet. Fans want to be there for those moments, not stuck refreshing screens or guessing what tickets are really going to cost. That's where Game Time comes in. The Game Time app gives fans the advantage back, making it incredibly easy to score amazing tickets. Fast, simple, without the guesswork. Browsing the Game Time app is straightforward and intuitive. Finding tickets takes just a few taps. Take the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets with Game Time. Download Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. This podcast is also brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. Friday's feeling a little different right now during the basketball season, and FanDuel is making them even better. Every Friday night before the games tip off, FanDuel gives fans a new way to kick off the weekend with NBA Happy Hour. NBA Happy Hour is their official pregame limited window where special offers drop right inside the FanDuel app before the action starts. That's Fridays from 6 to 7:30 Eastern have become appointment viewing with NBA Happy Hour. So before tip-off, check the FanDuel app. See what's dropping during NBA Happy Hour every Friday from 6 to 7:30 p.m. Eastern. Little basketball, little action, whole lot of Friday energy. That's NBA Happy Hour only on FanDuel, the official sports book partner of the NBA.
Shut it down! Let's go home!
All right, talking about Mark Aguirre's place in history, kind of just walking through briefly a little timeline of Mavs history. You see in the Mark Aguirre night that happened tonight for the Mavs, and you're like, if you're kind of a newer Mavs fan, you're like, why should I care about Mark Aguirre? Well, I think we should know the pillars of Mavs history before Dirk. Like I said earlier in the episode, you kind of have before Dirk, after Dirk. We know, for a lot of us, we know what happened after Dirk got here with the eras of Dirk into Luka into Cooper now. But before Dirk, there were 20 years of Mavs basketball, believe it or not. Some people probably don't think about that. The 90s were kind of tough, but the 80s have these fun teams, man, that went to the playoffs, conference finals, all led by, Mark Aguirre, Rolando Blackman, Derek Harper, which and Brad Davis is through there too. And now all four of those guys are in the rafters. So you go to the conference finals. I'm going back to this timeline here. They go to the conference finals there, and they face the Lakers. And then it's coming out of that you start to get a little drama. Obviously I wasn't there back then, so I'm just based off stuff that I've read and talking to people. There's just a lot of tension, a lot of things said from both sides of Mark Aguirre, the Mavs, Aguirre, and then the fans feeling like Aguirre wants out, and he did want out. He ends up getting traded to go to Detroit to play with Isiah Thomas, and then it doesn't help that they win 2 titles after that, in which the Mavericks, since Aguirre got traded, they only appeared in the playoffs one time and got beat in the first round, and so the next time they appeared in the playoffs was after Dirk got here. So you're looking at over 10 years that they didn't make the playoffs after Aguirre leaves. And so you have fans that blamed Aguirre because he asked out and wanted to be traded, and blamed him for leaving. There's drama with management. There's drama between Aguirre and teammates. There's so many interviews that he has done over the past 4 or 5 years with Scan Wade, with some of his teammates, with Harper and Rowe and those guys. And so that's as much as I want to summarize that, because I just wasn't there, and I wasn't covering the team then. So I just go read that, because that tension and the fallout of that, it just created this kind of fractured relationship between the franchise and Mark Aguirre for years. We're talking about that trade happened in the late 80s. and we're seeing a jersey retirement now in 2026. That's a long time, right? And a lot of people didn't know if that was ever going to happen, if that relationship was ever going to be mended enough for him to be celebrated and honored in this way. And we've seen Roe be in the rafters for a while, and Derek Harper handful of years ago, and now we've finally got to kind of the completion of that trio there with Aguirre going in the rafters. So they didn't. So as after Aguirre gets traded, they don't win another playoff game until 2001. Whenever they in April 28th, 2001. Like, that is crazy. The gap in between him getting traded to Detroit and then bam, that next time they're winning a playoff game was in the early 2000s. So, when you look back at the 80s, you look back at that first era of the Mavs, you have those three guys, and Aguirre is your first Mavs star. I mean, you think about Mavs stars throughout history, like best players on the team, guys that can put up 30 a game like Aguirre did. I mean, that's a pretty short list in Mavs history, right? Like, I mean, you're looking at, and especially that played for 7 years in Dallas. So, you're looking at guys like Luka, you're looking at guys like Dirk. And when you're making the list of players of best Mavericks of all time, after Dirk Nowitzki, and you're talking about, we're not talking about like role player types of guys. We're talking about like best overall players after Dirk Nowitzki in franchise history. It's a very small amount of guys that you're having that conversation with. I mean, Luka's obviously right up there, but it's like after that, you're like looking at Mark Aguirre. You're looking at, I mean, unless you want to sit here and go through some of the like young Steve Nash. I'm talking about when they played for the Mavs, like a younger Steve Nash or younger Jason Kidd or Sean Marion through those years. But you're looking at Aguirre and Harper and Rolando Blackman, and so we're talking about one of the best players in franchise history. He's third overall in the Mavericks total points scored. He's third in scoring average for the Mavs. So yeah, it's long overdue. I enjoyed the night, the ceremony. He has a pregame media session with media. Isiah Thomas is in there. There's a lot of tears. It's really emotional. There's a lot of Mavs royalty at the ceremony. Dirk Nowitzki's there, which is awesome, and a lot of other former Mavs and former teammates there. Aguirre gives a long emotional speech. Isiah Thomas talks. Derek Harper talks. It was just a really cool moment in Mavs history. And, I was thinking about it, and I said this before the day. Obviously, I'm not trying to say like who's the better player or anything like that, but I think I try to figure out how I try to zoom out sometimes and think, how are we going to view certain players in franchise history or certain players in NBA history? And I think of a guy like Joel Embiid. I'm like, how are we going to like remember Joel Embiid 15 years from now? How are we going to look back on a guy like that? If he never wins a title, it's like, man, remember Joel Embiid? Like, man, injuries, towards the end of his career, but he won that MVP. And I think back about like eras in Mavs history, and I think about a guy like Luka, and it's like we'll always, think back of this Luka era, but it's like Luka had 6 seasons, his first 6 years in Dallas. Let's say he never comes back to Dallas. And it's like Luka, he scores over 25 a game. He goes to 6 playoffs, 5 All-Stars, a Western Conference Finals twice. He goes to the finals once. And then I think back, I'm like, all right, well, how do we remember like a Mark Aguirre? And I'm like, do they have any type of similar comps to that? And it's like, it is kind of interesting because Aguirre plays, 7 seasons. He scores over 25 a game. He has 5 playoff appearances, 3 All-Stars, a Western Conference Finals. So yeah, Luka has more accolades, and like I'm not trying. It's just like I'm thinking about eras. Like you have Dirk that goes those like 20 years, and then you have like these spurts of these guys, these Hall of Famers like the Jason Kidds and Steve Nashes that have these like smaller spurts in Dallas and when they're younger. But as far as like peak of their powers for these like longer stretches, you look at a guy like Luka, you look at a guy like Mark Aguirre, these guys that spend 6-7 years as being an all-star, as being one of the top scorers in the league, as leading the Mavs to the playoffs those years, leading the Mavs to a conference finals. There's a little bit more similarities between the two than you probably think they are. But yeah, I think Michael Finley is going to be the next guy that will be. I think that, and I've just had different conversations about that. So, yeah, I would expect that maybe to happen next year, but could be wrong. I don't know anything as far as like date or timeline or any of that, but I fully expect, because when you look at, and I tweeted that out tonight, and I didn't expect the amount of Mavs fans that come back at it a little bit of like, no, better not, he shouldn't be. But when you look at guys in Mavericks history who have, that has the longevity and, where they land on some of the all-time rank or stat columns in Mavs history, Michael Finley kind of fits that next bar, or is the next player to kind of fit that type of, yeah. So I would expect him, maybe Jet at some point in history. My bar is a little bit lower for jersey retirements. I've always been a proponent of like, hey, if Brad Davis is in there, JJ Barea should be in there. But I think I fully expect Michael Finley and that number 4 jersey to be in the rafters sometime over the next 2 years. And it very well could be next year. So there's that. I know that's not for everybody. I love Mavs history. I love reading about Roy Tarpley days and what could have been, the 3 J's. I love reading and learning more about the times before Dirk and Cuban. I feel like I know a lot about Dirk and Cuban era, early 2000s, but learning about the 90s and 80s in Mavs history is something that I just continue to love to read about and learn about and talk to people about. And it was a really, really cool night for Mark Aguirre. He is one of the best players in franchise history. He deserves to be in the rafters, and he got that, and it was really cool to see that. We'll be back with another episode coming up over the weekend and another game coming up. Peace out.